Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics, and we have another great show with you. Today, we have two guests that they make up the podcast of OA on YouTube. They are just the two experts when it comes to lanterns in general. If you love Green Lanterns, you're going to love this show. But before we get into that, please give us a like, give us a subscribe. It really helps the channel. But yeah, we're going to sit with these two gentlemen and just talk everything Green Lanterns, that passion about Green Lanterns, what they think of the new Jeremy Adams run, which we're through 3 issues now. If you're collecting Night Terrors, that is issue 3 by Jeremy Adams. We also have from Philip Kennedy Johnson. He has a new war journal coming out that will be covering John Stewart toward the end of the year. So a lot of news. We just know that James Gunn just announced that Nathan Fillion will be playing Guy Gardner in Superman Legacy. We know that Hal and John will have an HBO series coming up next year. So there's just so much news. If you love Green Lanterns, now is the time to be alive because we are going to get a lot of Green Lanterns, and I'm super excited about it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this interview. Please give us a like and a subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And without further delay, here is Myron and Phil. Hope you enjoy. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the World at Comics podcast. We got 2 amazing guests from the podcast of OA, the Green Lantern Gurus. We got Myron and Phil. Gentlemen, thank you so much for jumping on. I can't wait to dig into it. By the way, I love your show. I learn more about Green Lantern through you than I do anywhere else. I don't have the money or time to go back into history and read a lot of the stuff that you gentlemen talk about, but man, I love it. Welcome to the show, though.
Thanks, Tommy. We really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome,
this is going to be a good time, man. This will be a good time.
It'll be a blast, man. So let's kind of start the beginning on the podcast, and we'll start there. What year did the podcast start?
So we started the podcast. Maybe this might have been the kiss of death. I don't know. We started the podcast with a review of the movie in 2011. That's what started it. I had been doing the blog of OA, which is the original incarnation of what I've been doing since right around Blackest Night, 2009. Oh, wow. And I had a friend who was running an internet geek radio channel, and it kind of went kaput. And he was like, I really want to do something creative. Why don't we do a podcast? So that was where it started. He ended up leaving a number of years later because of family commitments. He had a young family, and it was getting to the time where he needed to spend time with his family. Yeah. And ironically, Phil reached out to me and said, hey, I'd like to be on your show sometime. And I'm like, hey, that's funny. I'm looking for a co-host. what do you think?
Yeah.
So
and then dropped Phil.
We've been doing the show since 2011, and we've had the great fortune of having some wonderful creators on the show. Yeah. We just had Jeremy Adams and Philip Kennedy Johnson on to talk about their 2 new books. But we've had Ethan Van Sciver, we've had Robert Venditti. We did what is his name? Can't remember his name. We had the producers of the Green Lantern, the animated series.
Oh yes, yeah.
Aaron Cooter. The artist for Marvel. Mm-hmm. We actually did his first interview when he first broke into doing comics.
How cool is that?
That was really cool.
That is awesome, man. So let's go into the way back tracker. How long have you been a Green Lantern fan? When did the passion for Green Lantern start for both of you?
Jeez, man.
So you go first.
Yeah, because Myron's got a deeper thread. See, the thing about Myron and what I've learned when I kind of came onto the podcast is, my knowledge base is probably about, when it comes to lantern stuff, I got a pretty deep knowledge base, but the thing about Myron is his is deeper and it's particular. The guy has, he's like a Wikipedia of Green Lantern.
Man. I think you could say July of 83, issue 5, page 6. This is what happened.
A lot of it's research before a show, though. Let's be honest. And as you get older, you lose a lot of that stuff. And I do not have. I like to tell my wife I still have a mind like a steel trap. It's just rusted.
Yeah, exactly.
But when I came on, it was like, it's his knowledge base with, and I started. I have to be honest with you. My first comic book was the first issue of G.I. Joe when it came out with Marvel back in 81 or 82. And, and I was up at the Shortstop, this little mom and pop shop up the road. My dad took me in and pick one out. And I picked out Joe, and I was hooked. Later on, and probably about 84 or so, I started picking up on Superman, and then it just took off from there. And then I picked up Green Lantern right after that, and been reading that since probably about 85, 86.
Nice.
And jumped on, but like the thing about Lantern is I came and went with Green Lantern, and Superman I've always remained the same thread, but but anyway, that's when I came on. And then of course I was on the podcast of Oa a couple times with him and Bill, with Myron and Bill, and it was fun because he was talking about stuff. And when I listened to them guys beforehand, I was like, man, Myron knows his shit, man. This guy, I mean, the guy's got a knowledge base, man. I mean, if there's something, the thing that's overlooked about Myron, and I'll be honest with you, if there's something that, I don't know, I just feel like he would be a kind of guy that somebody should reach out to for research, qualities. I mean, he's got a good deep understanding of it, and sure, he has his emotional part with it too, and who doesn't when it comes to comic books. But I was on the show with them guys a couple of times, and like I said, man, I reached out one time. I was like, man, I want to be on the podcast again. And he's like, hey, well, by the way, hell yeah.
Perfect timing for a phone call, right?
Yeah, it was great,
Right,
man.
right.
Me and Myron hooked up. Unfortunately, we've never got to meet in person, but
Yeah.
I mean, man, it's been a great friendship too.
So to this day,
yeah.
you haven't met in person?
No.
That's crazy, man.
Phil's in St. Louis, and I'm in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, like smack dab in the Sun State. So we have never met in person.
That is
now
awesome.
There is an upside to that though, because predating 2020 when Clark came along, I'm kind of glad that I hadn't went up there to visit him yet, because now Clark knows who Uncle Myron is. So it's better that if we go up there as a family, I get to finally meet him in person with his wife, and he gets to meet
cool
too. So
yeah,
and that's where the bonus is out of this.
That's awesome, man.
I can't think of a time that I wasn't reading comics.
Yeah.
I was born with a very freaky birth defect. So when you're in the womb developing, your esophagus comes from your stomach and down from your throat, and they connect. My birth defect was one of a variation where that doesn't happen properly. And in my situation, the upper half of my esophagus grew into my lungs.
Oh, wow.
Into my trachea. So I was very fortunate for it to be detected, because back in the 60s when I was born, you didn't have ultrasounds that could detect. You didn't have any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of surgery as an infant, and was very sickly as a kid.
Yeah.
And I read a lot, and my family was very poor. And back in the day, you used to be able to buy coverless comics in bags for like a nickel. And so my mom and dad would buy me comics to keep me entertained, because I would get sick at school and get pneumonia, and I'd be out of school for a month.
Yeah.
And, back then there was no 24-hour, cartoon channels or anything like that to keep a kid entertained.
You had to wait for Saturdays to come along, right?
It was funny because I never all the comics were without the covers on them. I never understood why Spider-Man and Batman had never met each other.
Yeah,
because I didn't know the difference between Marvel and DC. I had no clue.
I didn't even realize there were two different universes, right?
No. And my sister had dated a young man who had a good sized comic book collection, and he gave me his comic book collection.
Wow.
And in there were things like the death of Gwen Stacy, some of the Denny O'Neil Hard Traveling Heroes, Neil Adams books were in there. And I fell in love with Green Lantern because it wasn't about his physical prowess. It wasn't about any of those things. It was about his will. And the side effect of my birth defect is that I choke because I have scar tissue in my esophagus. I choke. And growing up, the only way you really got through all that stuff was you had to force the food down with the muscles in your throat and liquids, or not to get gross, but you'd have to make yourself throw up, or and I had a lot of close calls as a kid. And in the moments when I would be struggling to deal with it, I would think about Green Lantern, because it was all about his will and his mentality. It was that, not the physical prowess. And that carried me through a lot of really tough moments as a kid. So I latched onto it from that more than anything else. And then when when Black and Snake came out and we got that whole renaissance of the Jeff Johns era, I was
Yeah.
like, I really owe this character a lot. I don't want to be corny to say that Green Lantern saved my life, but
Yeah, I get it.
it motivated me. It gave me what I needed to get through something that was really hard, and continues to this day to be an issue. It's never going to go away.
Right.
And as you get older, you face different challenges because you don't have the strength and so on and so forth. But that was the love for me. And I was like, I need to give back to this franchise. So I started the blog of OA as a means of trying to be a good ambassador for the Green Lantern franchise, even though I don't agree with everything about it.
Sure.
As comic fans, you don't agree with editorial decisions and all that kind of stuff.
You never will agree
No.
full on. It's just not going to happen, man.
I mean, a card carrying member of Heat. Okay. But I felt like, I wanted to give back to the characters and do something positive. So I started writing things. I've written over 2,000 blog articles over the years, and I got invited to be on the Raging Bullets podcast. And I was like, well, this is a lot of fun. I did college radio. I'm an introvert, but I enjoyed being behind a mic.
Yeah.
Doing video has been very difficult for me, but I'm embracing it because it brings another audience to the content. And it's about, for me, it's about providing content to Green Lantern fans and trying to enhance their fan experience. If somebody reads my website or listens to our show or watches our show and it enhances their fan experience, I've done my job.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
all
it's
that
worked
matters,
for me,
right?
man. It's worked for me. Go ahead, Phil. Sorry.
That's all that matters. I mean,
exactly.
Myron and I talk about that all the time. It's like, there's a lot of people out there that have this expectation when they're sitting behind the mic, and it's like, what kind of expectation can you possibly carry when you get on a podcast or anything like that? You can't have that.
Right.
You go into you don't know who you're talking to out there. You're talking into the whatever's out there. And if it reaches people, man, that's when the impact, that's when you're like, wow, that's cool, man. It's like Myron, we'll talk about the stats and stuff and different people that listen across the globe and stuff. It's like, wow, man, somebody's listening to us way over there.
Yeah, that's
crazy.
That's the powerful thing of this medium is that you think, like, when Bill and I started the show, I'm like, well, nobody's going to listen to us talk about Green Lantern. Are you kidding? And then you start getting emails from like England and Australia and things like that. I'm like, really? Well, listen to us talk about Green. And there's a whole network of Green Lantern shows that are out there now. Probably the ones we're closest to are the Lantern Cast, and they've been around. Their show's been around longer than ours. But we have kind of this little close-knit community, and it's like, we don't always agree on the same things, and that's great because fans can listen to their content, our content, and other Green Lantern podcasts that are out there, and they can find what they like or what they don't like. And if you don't like what we have to say, tune us off for an episode or two. We try to look at it very even-handedly, and there have been times when the content hasn't been that good, and you try to approach it in a way that you're respectful to people that may like it, even though you really don't. And sometimes it's difficult because sometimes you get like, I'm a fierce defender of the franchise. And when you think somebody's doing something that's not really, in the best interest, at least in my opinion, the best interest of the franchise, I feel like I've got to say something about it. And if I'm not going to be authentic, then don't listen to me. If I'm going to be fake.
And another thing to jump onto that is, too many people take it personal. It's like, man, it's not personal. I rip on Simon Bass all the time, and I literally cannot stand the character. But at the same time, I also am intelligent enough to know that he should be allowed to be at the table. Then if he's already out there, he's created. They should be doing something with the guy.
He's got his fans.
For sure.
And
two of them,
and that's cool.
Tim Seeley,
right. And the same goes for Batman. I literally hate Batman, and he's everywhere. Wow. And I razz on Batman because I have fun with it. I already know the fact he's a seller. Myron knows the fact he's a seller. You could put Batman in every book, period, and DC would probably outsell everything.
50% of all DC comics is either Batman or the Batman family.
Right.
But at the same time, man, we razz on it, and it's a good time. And I don't take anything personal unless people come at me personally, but we've never had that happen on this show. We've had a couple negative interactions, a couple negative emails. Some guy got what on our case about something.
He got on our case about something. I don't remember just now what it was, and he
we
sent
don't
an
even
email
care.
saying,
Yeah.
he sent an email
I
saying,
don't even-
I'm not going to listen to the show anymore. And I aired it anyway. I aired his comments and, rebutted to it and whatever,
Yeah.
But we've done some really cool things. One of the things we did during the pandemic was Phil has this really neat segment called Know Your Core, and he spotlights a different member of the core. And we thought during the pandemic, I work in IT and education, and we all had to work remotely here in New York State. I had some employees that worked for me and with me who didn't have families, and so they were home alone. And I would have team meetings every day, not because we had work to talk about, but because I wanted to make sure they had somebody to talk to.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So what we did during the pandemic is we did a weekly. We took the show and did it weekly, and we called it "You Are the Core," and
cool.
we flipped it around and we interviewed fans.
That's cool.
That's a lot of fun, man.
That was a lot of fun. We got to talk to a lot of neat people and find out more. We had some stock questions, and we interviewed them as if they were, a creator or something. What's your favorite character? What do you like? And just for conversational purposes, and to remind people that at the end of the day, we're all human, and we've got to be here for each other.
Absolutely.
We had on this guy named Martin. He's my local comic book shop guy in this place called Apotheosis here in St. Louis. During the pandemic, it hit communities hard, right? And it hit local businesses really hard. Everybody knows the comic book industry took a hit.
Yep.
So what he ended up doing, what made him stand out, and what he started talking about when he came on our podcast, was he started delivering comics. And then he started selling alcohol, like beer and stuff like that. He delivered beer and comics. I'll tell you what,
that's a pretty good combination.
Yeah, it got him through the pandemic. I guarantee it's what saved his store, and he's still going. As a matter of fact, I was just up there this afternoon to pick up my stuff, and
that's awesome.
I'm kind of looking for a part-time gig with him. He always says he's going to contact me, but it's like, dude, I go back to work August 7th, man. You're gonna have to contact me soon. So anyway, but yeah, that was it. That was cool. And it was fun to record every week because there wasn't anything to do. And we're like, well, why not? We're not doing anything. I was raising a kid, but he was asleep by then. We had a good time doing it, man. That was fun.
That's so cool. Well, how often are you recording?
That's the funny thing. We try to do 2 episodes a month.
Okay. Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Life gets in the way.
Sure.
Phil and I both work in the education field.
Yeah.
He has a young family. I have an old family.
Yeah.
So sometimes things just happen, and it doesn't come out that way. And you feel bad because you want to be consistent. That's the big thing about doing podcasting or any content provision that you do is to keep your audience, you need to be on a regular routine.
Yeah.
And we've decided that the show's about Green Lantern. So if there's no Green Lantern content, we're not going to talk about Spider-Man because the show, people tune into us for that. So we started doing we went back there for a while because it had been kind of lean the last couple of years. Yeah. We started redoing the Jeff Johns run because we never recorded content about the Jeff Johns run.
Yeah.
Or we did an episode where we did the case for Carol Ferris, and we did I spent, I don't know how many hours doing an analysis of the history of Carol Ferris and how many times did they break up and who broke up with who. And it was like, well, is she really the right guy, really the right woman for Hal kind of thing? And we've done one on Sornik Natu. And so we've done some of those special spotlighty things. Top 5 favorite female characters, I think we did. And those kind of things. And it breaks up the monotony of doing reviews because you don't want to be just a review show.
Yeah.
And I love those, by the way, too, because you get into a lot of the history that I think, especially over the last 5 years, if you're new to Green Lantern, you have no idea what's taking place, right? And so there's a lot of history out there. There's a lot of lanterns that people have never heard of that are from Earth. So there's a lot that I think a lot of content, and you guys do a really good job of highlighting that.
The thing we always looked at it from the get-go was we were in the Jeff Johns era. There were so many new fans that became a part of the core that we felt like this obligation of, well, there was a lot of history before this. There were a lot of great comics before this. And some of the stuff, like Jeff Johns did a good job of reinterpreting things or kind of doing a new angle on things. And it's good to go back and look at, well, what was the inspiration for some of this stuff? Blackest Night came from an Alan Moore short story. Stuff like that people don't know. It adds a layer of context when they're reading stuff, which I hope people find valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is so cool.
But it's popular too. I mean, and
Yeah.
then look at the podcasting aspect. I mean, you're fairly new, Tommy, and like, and that's cool though, because it's a thing that it's a community that I didn't think I'd be a part of. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I got on with Myron, and I got on early in
Yeah.
podcasting as far as podcasters go, and then now it's what a lot of people talk about, you know, and
Yeah.
like Myron had said, but this is the first time we've taken the foray into video this past few episodes, and I kind of like it. It's kind of
Yeah.
nice for people to be able to see us now for a change. I don't know how often we get ripped on or what kind of comments get.
I don't know if we're doing
care.
anybody any favors by letting them see what we look
I mean,
like.
you know, whatever. You know, and at the end of the day, I don't care. I mean, if
Yeah,
you're gonna
yeah.
rip on me, that screw you. You don't need a. That's not cool. I'm just here talking about comic books. You don't need to rip on me.
It does add a layer to the whole production part.
Yeah.
I had the luxury of when Bill was doing the show with me, he did all the editing and I did all the publication and promotion.
Okay. Yeah.
When he left, I took it all on. So I do all of the editing and everything. And so then we added the video layer. I'm like, okay, how am I going to edit the video and do a YouTube thing, but still have the audio for the podcast? And so I've been reworking how I do it all. And it's good because it stretches different muscles in your head. But it is a whole different ball game for us. But I enjoy it. It makes the recording process better because when you can see the person you're talking to, you're less likely to overtalk them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so it helps the communication be more organic. I hope it comes across that way.
Absolutely. And also I listen to a lot of podcasts because I drive quite a bit. I live near Palm Springs. My office is in San Diego. So it's a good hour and 45 or 2.5 hour drive. So I don't have to go every day. But when I do, I got a podcast going all the time and I enjoy it. But when I could throw YouTube on and I could see the same content, but see, for instance, both of you, it creates a connection. So like when I reached out to Phil, I feel like I've known Phil for a long time and he has no idea who I am, right? So I have to like be careful on how I'm reaching out to him, going like, hey, Phil, it's me, Tommy. He's like, who the hell is Tommy, right? Like, I'm sorry, I know you more than you know me for sure, right? But,
and then he's like, well, here, just text me. This is a lot easier. It'd be easier to check it. And then he texts me, I'm like, this is way easier.
Exactly.
Well, isn't that the beauty of this kind of a medium? Because you get to meet people, friends, for so long growing up, comics were very much, you were kind of the geek kid hiding in the corner. You didn't know there was anybody else out there that liked the same things that you liked. And because of the beauty of the internet and podcasting and all of these things, people come together. I mean, you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, he's in the middle of the country, and here we all are all having a conversation that could never happen otherwise.
Exactly.
And the thing that's really cool about that is all three of us came from a generation of when we were discriminated upon for reading comic books, right?
Exactly.
And not a lot of people understand the fact that happened.
Oh yeah.
You didn't talk about that crap with people, man, or else you got, look at that guy.
You were going to get you were going to get a swirly is what it meant.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I grew up in San Bernardino, which is it is known for its gangs. And so I would ride my bike to the local comic book store and I'd ride really fast back home to make sure all my comics got home with me. So it was more in a swirly if I got caught if I wasn't fast enough.
Well, I grew up in the days when you didn't have comic shops. So you had to go to the convenience store and hope you could find the issue you're looking for.
Yeah.
And you never knew when the book was actually coming out. So you were like, if you missed an issue, there was no place to buy back issues. You were SOL if you couldn't find the issue you needed.
Exactly. Yeah. I was very fortunate. I had one right up the street and I would ride up my bike, every time every Wednesday or whatever. And I would mow lawns to try and raise money. And yeah, I was a big G.I. Joe guy. I'm like you, Phil. That was one of my first comics. I grew up with G.I. Joe. I mean, I played G.I. Joe in my room. Dude, I remember my dad would take me fishing all the time, and they had the fish hook, the 3-prong fish hook, and it was really small, and I'd tie string to it, and all my G.I. Joes would use it as gavilan. And I remember my sister stepping on it, and it has the hook that comes down. So you got to cut that end off to pull it out, or you just got to rip it out. And anyways, that was my upbringing, man. I had a few G.I. Joe guys, and I'd be in my room with my gavel and trying to climb up my bed, and it was fun, man. And then when the comic came out, I was like blown away.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man.
Larry Hama, man. I just got finished. I was telling Myron this. So I just read volume all 25 volumes of IDW's Real American Hero.
Yeah.
And I just kept reading it. And then I finally got to the end of volume 25, and then I had to finish it because I wanted to get to 300.
Yeah.
Finished it out, right? And I was like, man, I mean, number one, there's a couple things I didn't like about it. I didn't like the ending because it's like, that's where you leave it. And not only that's where you leave it, but you lost your licensing with IDW, and now we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, now we know, though. Now we know.
Yeah. But yeah, I went through all of it. Now I'm reading all the other volumes, like the Cobra Command issues, the Snake Eyes origin and stuff. But I dove hard into Joe in the past over this summer, and it's been great.
I love G.I. Joe, man.
Yeah, it's fun.
Actually, where I live in a city called Hemet, and not too far from me is another city called Temecula. And every year they have a G.I. Joe con. It's pretty awesome in Temecula. It's fairly small, but they create a figure that's unique to that show every single year. So it's pretty awesome. And Jamie Sullivan, who is the cover artist for G.I. Joe, has been for many years. He usually does like the cover being on. He lives here in Hemet, and he used to own the comic book store here in Hemet. And so I'll have him on, I think maybe after San Diego Comic-Con. But I used to go to his comic shop all the time and chat with him, and he's a really nice guy. And so I have my issue 300 because, he did the cover with the 300 different,
awesome.
Joe. Yeah, it's incredible. So he did that. He had the record until Fantastic Four came out. What was it, issue 800? And they have like 350. So he lost the record. It only took like 3 months. But anyways, he was signing at our local comic book shop too. But yeah, if you're ever out this way, man, you got to go to G.I. Joe Con.
There's two people I want to meet, man, and Myron knows one of them. Dan Jurgens. And Larry Hama. I want to meet the man before he doesn't write G.I. Joe anymore. That guy's got to have so much knowledge about Joes, man.
For sure.
Oh, wow. I could imagine. It's like Myron with Green Lantern, though. So it makes
sense. It's awesome.
It is.
Well, I have a Green Lantern question for both of you, and I don't know if this is a fair question, but do you have a favorite lantern?
Go ahead,
Phil, is that going to create issues?
No, go ahead, Phil. You're first.
Shocking the world here. Simon Baz going with it.
I knew it.
Let's see. Well, it's kind of a toss up. Hal Jordan's always been my go-to, and I really liked the early Jessica Cruz.
I
don't like what they've done to her over the past.
Neither do I. But the early one was amazing. I loved everything that happened to her to make her the character that she was so
right. It was really, really important. I think they lost sight of that over the years, but both of those guys would be my top two.
She's one of my major crushes, to be quite honest. Early one.
Myron's not a big fan of her, but I mean, but that's the beauty of fandom, right? I mean, we all have connections who we have connections with, and it's like I don't like Jon Stewart, but I'll still read Jon Stewart, and I'm actually looking forward to Johnson's version of Jon Stewart, to be quite honest with you. But I don't like the character, but I'm looking forward to reading it. It's that same thing,
right?
So
for me, it's Hal Jordan all the way. For my opinion on Jessica is I think she was a better character as Power Ring. I felt
that's
like
fair.
There was so much potential there because people who don't deal with depression and so on don't understand what it's like. And I felt like the way that the ring of Volthoom that she had treated her acted as an external version of the inner voice that she might hear. And so I thought there was so much potential with that.
It did add to the anxiety of her character.
And
it made it worse,
overcoming that. It made that struggle better. And the problem with her being a Green Lantern is writers are going to lose the novelty of that rather quickly. It's the same problem that happened with Kyle Rayner. You can only be the new guy for so long. And now there's hardly anything to differentiate him from any other Green Lantern. Green Lantern as a franchise is really interesting because its greatest strength is that you can have all of these different Green Lanterns to root for. Its greatest weakness is it has all of these Green Lanterns that divide the fan base, because what happens inevitably is whenever Green Lantern is used in something, it's like, well, why isn't it my favorite Green Lantern, or why is it my? And then you get there's this divisiveness in the fan base, and you can never make them all happy. They've created so many Earth Lanterns, but there's not enough books to support them. You had the we had the wonderful era during the Jeff Johns time where you had 5 books.
Yeah,
So you could
yeah.
spread it out and everybody could get a spotlight. And now we're back down to 1, soon to be 2. And we don't know if the second one is going to be an ongoing or a limited series. It started out being a limited series, but what Johnson told us was that he thinks it's going to be longer, but if it's going to be a full-time book, he doesn't think he'll be able to stick with it.
Okay.
Um,
Which also is a problem, right? Because every writer has their take, and if he goes, say it's going to be an ongoing series, and he does 6 of them, and then someone takes over, we'll all notice right away. Usually.
Oh
yeah. And that's also another frustration, which happens with Green Lantern sometimes too.
Right.
It's called poor planning. You know, it's
Yeah.
just that's DC Publishing. You can blame them. I mean, it's like if you're going to commit to something, commit to something. It's like when they had that Yahoo tournament. You know, the last couple of stupid Yahoo tournaments they had. You know, they had all this talent pool.
Yeah.
And they created all these books, and then what are they? At the end of the day, they base it off voting, which everybody knows is a bunch of crap anyway. So, but me and Myron talked about that. It's like, well, why wouldn't you create all these books?
Yeah.
Put them out there for the people, and then let them choose and let them read the content before you just let them look at it. I mean,
DC Comics is in need of showcase.
Yeah.
Where they that's how we got Barry Allen, and that's how we got Hal Jordan, was they did 3-issue runs in Showcase and gauged fan reaction. So why don't we do the same thing? There's where you're going to find your next breakout character. We keep talking about how, we missed the Green Lantern Corps. We flooded the franchise with so many Earth characters. And DC feels so beholden to give them all spotlights that the alien characters have faded to the background. For me, the most fun Green Lantern has ever been is when it was Hal Jordan and a bunch of wacky aliens.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
So I've been saying for a while now, we need to have, I don't know if you guys remember Green Lantern Corps Quarterly, which was a quarterly book that spotlighted different characters. They need that, or they used to have Tales of the Green Lantern Corps as a backup in the Green Lantern book. Bring that back. I mean, if the John Stewart book is going to spin out of the series like it's going to, then why not replace that with another backup and either spotlight other characters that don't have a book, or do something to grow that franchise to try to get it back to the glory days it had. It certainly can support those books. DC completely mismanaged it when Johns and Tomasi left. No disrespect to any of the writers that came in. But they weren't big names. Like Van Jensen had never written a mainstream comic. He had done Pinocchio Vampire Killer or something to that effect. And he was throwing the Green Lantern Corps book, and Robert Venditti, who had done X-O Man of War at that point, but still wasn't a name.
At the time.
So you take a franchise which at one time rivaled Batman in terms of popularity. And you handed it off to folks that didn't have the marquee value to keep people entertained. And then unfortunately for Robert Venditti, his first story was not very well received because it kind of downplayed the fantasy aspect of using a power ring that runs on will. It was all about the emotional reservoir running dry, and it wasn't necessarily a bad story, but it wasn't a good leadoff story.
No, that's a good point. So Hal Jordan.
Oh yeah.
I
mean,
no brainer.
I love it. That is awesome.
That's gonna be on his. That's gonna put that on his tombstone here. Like,
right.
It's not gonna be Myron anymore. I think he's taking on Hal Jordan's persona.
Hal Jordan is I always say Hal Jordan is my co-pilot.
That is awesome. So is there a series in Green Lantern that's your favorite series? Like, is there a run that you look back on and go, that's my favorite run? Or is that too hard? Is that too hard of a question?
I have 2.
Do you? Let's hear your 2 then, Phil, while Myron goes through his Rolodex of
what that pause he took when he was looking back, but that's him engaging his database.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen closely, hear the files click. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I liked Renegade. I thought Renegade was cool. That's still one of my favorites. It was really cool because I got to meet Venditti. He actually he came here to St. Louis, went to my comic book store, and I got to go up there. Yeah, I got to go up there and meet him. I was talking to him about it, and he's like, "Man, and it was funny when I told him that. He's like, he smiled. He goes, "Not many people say that's their favorite." And I was like, "I like what you did with the character. I like how he was written, and I liked how he looked. I thought his outfit was cool." And And Blackest Night was a good
Yeah,
time.
Blackest Night is just incredible, man.
Sinestro Core War would be your probably a
Yep.
third option.
Got to be up there, right on the list of
Yeah.
maybe top 10 at least, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
got to be. It's a mainstay for any Green Lantern fan.
For sure.
If they're going to read Green Lantern and get familiar with the character, they should at least delve into Sinestro Core War so they're familiar with the other side of it.
Yeah,
it just makes
exactly.
sense. Yeah.
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 So those are my top two.
Myron, did you find anything in a file back there?
I mean, if you really encapsulate the, if you take the John's run in its entirety, that's probably the most commercially and popular, successful run. So you can't not talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I also loved the run in the 80s, Steve Englehart, Mike W. Barr, that era, where there was a lot of experimentation and it was a lot of the sci-fi elements that I love so much. But the John's run it's just so hard not to go to that. I mean, it seems like the low-hanging fruit, but when you looked at his, he had the luxury of planning a lot of it out. So he had, the whole 3 acts of Green Lantern Rebirth, Sinestro Corps War, and Blackest Night, and that was his plan.
Yeah.
And that body of work up through there, and maybe a little after, because it got a little afterwards. He kind of, I think, ran out of gas.
Yeah.
Well, Brightest Day ran it out of gas. Brightest Day kind of took the. It kind of took it when it was like the air getting let out of the balloon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think he wasn't sure where do I go, because I told the story I wanted to tell, but the book is going so gangbusters, I can't just up and walk away. And I didn't like the whole Guardians as bad guys routine. For me, the Guardians have always, from my perspective, have always just been these beings that are so evolved they've lost touch with emotions and humanity. And where Hal was a great foil was that he would remind them, he'd call them on the carpet for things that they would think about, and they would not necessarily value the life of an individual. They would always think so big picture. They never got down into the margins. And I really liked that dynamic. I didn't like the idea of them as villains. I'd rather see them as people who struggle because they've evolved beyond the level of everyone around them, and they see things so differently. To me, that was more enjoyable. So I didn't like that part of the run. It's funny because a lot of people will talk about the Hard Traveling Heroes era as such a great series of books, but I felt like in the Hard Traveling Heroes era, I mean, they were of the time, but it was like, well, we've got to make Hal this character who's right leaning because we need Ali. He's left leaning, and we want to tell stories about that kind of stuff. And Hal has been painted as that for a long time. He's like the last person I would think of as a stuffy person who thinks of following orders all the time. He's not been that person. And so it kind of undid some of that. But there for a while, I think the character struggled because, the character was created in the 1950s when test pilots were a glamorous job. And it became not that. And DC didn't really know how to deal with it. So they made him an insurance salesman. He was not an insurance salesman. He was an insurance adjuster, I believe. He was a truck driver. He was a toy salesman. I mean, stuff like that is just like, come on, then make him an astronaut or find something new. But
I think that happens with a lot of characters in both Marvel and DC because they have such a long canon on some of these characters, right? That they never grow with where society's at any given time. And all of a sudden, right, they become old and people start to lose disinterest unless they have some sort of a unique ability to stay current because of their relatability outside of their powers and everything else. I don't know if that made sense, but
no, it does. So you have to have a hook, and and I think that a lot of problem with that lies in the length of a lot of these writers and stuff getting on these books. I mean, to me, a year of Green Lantern with a writer, it's just touching the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's kind of like, Myron works in education. I've always been a principal. If you come in and you're going to be a principal of a high school, don't come in and do it for a year or two and then go to another school. A good 4-year rotation is a good rotation for that. With these writers, like with Grant Morrison, they did a good 2-year stint. I would have liked to have seen another year of it because I bet you that series could have had more to it. But I don't think you're going to get a writer that's going to want to commit 3 years to a character. Venditti did it for so long, and it's like, he knew so much, and he expanded on it, and he built off of what Johns did, and Johns did it for so long that now these writers come and go for the Jeff Thorne run. That's going to be forgettable, other than a footnote to say it was crap. But at the same time, it's like, I wish somebody would stay on it a little bit more. It's like John.
Tell me what you really think, Phil.
Right.
I'm not sure I really get the emotion that you were trying to portray.
I get to say that on here, right?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
I think long term, a lot of these characters, like you said, Tom, was that it's a struggle sometimes to keep them relevant.
Yeah.
And for Hal Jordan as a character, if a test pilot is no longer a glamorous profession, we'll take him off of Earth and leave him off of Earth.
Yeah.
It's the type of franchise that the science fiction element, you can play off of that and do that for a long time. And they did that on and off. You had times when you had a whole run where the Guardians told Hal he's spending too much time on Earth and he wasn't allowed to go to Earth. And he had to go out there and explore the rest of his sector. And it was so interesting because it was stuff we hadn't seen in a while, because he was so tied to the same superhero formula that has been around since the dawn of comics.
Sure.
It was very interesting. And that's one of the things this franchise has the luxury of, is most of these characters can't have a life. Really.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I'm wondering, with some of the news that we've heard from James Gunn with Nathan Fillion playing Guy Gardner, I'm wondering if that is insight into where maybe Jeremy Adams is going. Do you think that they have that kind of thought process when they are doing a TV show or a movie, or do you think they're completely separate and that has nothing to do with it?
To listen to James Gunn talk, it's all going to be related. And he said that Nathan Fillion was going to be playing Guy Gardner in every iteration of where that character shows up, and he'll probably show up in the Lanterns TV show.
Yeah.
I think Nathan Fillion, he did the voice of Hal in a number of DC movies. He certainly has the fan cred. I think he was looking for what he's personally. I've always thought of Bill Burr as Guy Gardner.
Bill Burr would be great, although he doesn't have the hair anymore.
No, that's true. That's
the
true.
red hair.
Well, you could do a wig. Yeah,
for sure.
But I think it'll be interesting. If I have any concerns, it's just the age of the character or the age of the actor. And I certainly he's younger than me, so I'm not. But I don't want to see. I don't want to see old man Hal. I don't want to see Tom Cruise.
I've heard that go
retiring.
around.
Please no. We deserve to see these characters in their prime. And that's what I want to see. So I'm interested to see how Nathan Fillion is going to be playing Guy, but it's almost like an Emerald Renaissance in a way, because
really
Green Lantern has been kind of in the black hole of don't touch this property since 2011. People haven't been able to let it go. It's like the Incredible Hulk had 2 or 3 stinkers and he still was in the Avengers. Come on. But he's been kind of in this black hole of we're not going to touch this character. It's, it's poison. So it's interesting to see that happen. And I still want to see what they're going to do with the Lanterns TV show. If we ever see it. And I don't mean that I'm skeptical of James Gunn, but we've been hearing about the show for a while now, and it's changed directions a couple of times and people are tied with it. Apparently Tom King is going to be involved in the show, which some people are like, oh, Tom King's Heroes in Crisis, Tom King. But I'm like, if you go back and read his Dark Side War one shot with Hal, that's one of the best single issue Green Lantern stories of the last 10 years.
Good story. That's a good that's a good arc too, by the way.
Oh yeah. And so I remember I interviewed Tom King before he became Tom King. I interviewed him at a convention, and he said to me, he goes, Hal Jordan is the most fun character to write, and I think he gets the character. That's so awesome. I'm interested to see what he would do with it, if indeed he's having that much control over it, because I don't see him as doing something bad with the character. I think he likes the character. He said to me he'd like to write Green Lantern again at some point, because he did the Omega Men run.
That's right.
People were talking about how Hal and Heroes in Crisis he made a thing about, well, I don't even know what willpower is, and they were kind of like, well, that seems kind of weird. But if you think about the character, he's not the one that's going to bear his emotion to anybody. So if you put him and say you're going to go have therapy, he's not going to be upfront and honest with you and open to you. He doesn't open up to anybody. He guards that stuff. You have to. Hal Jordan is kind of like Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones doesn't sit at a bar and talk about his emotions. You find out about the character through their actions.
Yeah.
And they very rarely do they open up and have that emotional intimacy. And I think you're seeing some of that in this new Jeremy Adams run, in that we talked about it off mic. There's something we think is going on with Hal Jordan that hasn't really been elaborated on.
Yes.
A theory. And so Hal is grasping out for something because he's lost. He doesn't have the core. He doesn't really have his power ring. He doesn't have a job because the world has moved on from test pilots. They showed the scene where he's flying a drone. So he doesn't have anything. And his only real connection to home is Carol Ferris.
Yeah.
So he's doing some things which are not exactly, he's being a little pushy with Carol.
Yeah.
And it's a little cringy.
Yeah.
But I think there's a reason for it, and it's because he's desperate.
It's the only relatable thing, probably, too, right? Right now.
Yes.
There could be another reason.
Yeah.
I could blow your mind with this one.
No.
It could be just a bad dream.
That too.
Night terrors. I mean,
night terrors, man.
I mean, it could all be nothing. Like at the end of the day, we're gonna fast forward, and then Hal Jordan and Carol Ferris are gonna be married and stuff.
But I thought
he'll wake up. That'll be the real terror in his life.
Night Terrors did a really good job. I mean, Jeremy Adams kind of went for the low-hanging fruit. I mean, obviously, Martin Jordan's death, the parallax thing we know is coming up. That's kind of been done.
Yeah.
But it's interesting in how he does it. Sometimes you don't mind reliving your story or elements that you've seen before, just for the fresh perspective and his approach to the character. And I think, Jeremy Adams wrote an episode or two of the Green Lantern, the animated series.
Yeah.
And just in talking to the guy, he respects these characters.
Oh, he does. I mean, you see what he did with the Flash, right? He really does a lot of research, and he really understands, and he's a fan. So I have a feeling he's been reading a lot of these comics up to this point anyways.
Yeah. He's one of us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I have confidence in the storytelling in the writer, that I'm kind of overlooking some of the things where I'm like, well, gosh, he's being a little pushy with Carol. That's kind of a little cringy.
Yeah.
There's other things that could be going on, and we have to see the destination. Sometimes we as fans, we're so quick to judge the journey before we figure out where it's going or why there may be some reasons why some things are happening. We're kind of quick to judge sometimes.
Well, and it needs a chance to breathe, I mean, like we look back to, and Myron and I have discussed this a lot, with Morrison's run. It took a few issues to get used to his writing and what he was going to do with the character, usually by issue, I'd usually average it out to be about 4 or 5. You kind of know if you're going to like it or not, I mean, unfortunately, like with some runs, you get to know sooner than that. I mean, by issue 2 with Jeff Thorne's run, it's like, I just kind of knew. I was like, I just don't know if this is going to go anyplace good. So, but
I'm sure the one shot corrected all of that, though.
It didn't. None of it did. It didn't correct anything. It didn't. It was like,
sorry, I didn't mean to throw fuel in the fire, but the timing was just right.
Well, and if you think about it like this, add to the fact that I'm not even a huge John Stewart fan. I was actually looking forward to reading a good John Stewart story.
Yeah.
And I was left with what I was. It's like, okay, I'm not even a huge John Stewart fan, but I know this is not John Stewart.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So, and then, then Dick Adams, he comes on board. Issue 1, he pegs it. I mean, he nails it all cylinders. You get a great feel coming out of the gate. You already know by issue 2, you're going to be like, I already know I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
So if you have that preceding feeling, you already know it's going to run into a good, I mean, you're going to, down the line, you might have a couple lackluster issues. Every writer probably has that. But as long as they tell a cohesive narrative story arc, I mean, there's no, I think it's going to go up, and hopefully he stays on a little bit longer.
I hope so too. I mean, he did Flash, I think, from 768 to 800, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and he was taken off that to do Lantern, by the way. So, like,
but I'm wondering if he doesn't have another run that goes that far,
I don't. Yeah, he wasn't. He was very upset with the fact that he had to leave the Flash. So,
I think any Flash fan was upset as well.
Yeah,
I
would have
liked
liked to
his
have
run.
seen him stay on it too.
But as a Green Lantern fan, I like Green Lantern more than Flash. I'm really happy as a Green Lantern fan, but that Flash run was just one of the best runs in a long time, I think.
It was.
Yeah.
Myron's not a big Flash fan.
I like the Flash. I like the Flash.
I got my Flash.
Oh yeah, you're a big Flash fan.
Yeah.
If you put
I'm a big
body
fan
permanently, you're a fan for sure.
Right, there you go. I'm a big fan of the Barry Hal dynamic.
Yeah, I like Barry too.
I liked Wally, and I liked what they did. I think bringing Barry back kind of undermined some of that, And again, that's another example of how when we talk about Green Lantern, the divisiveness of the fan base. It's the exact same thing with the Flash, and that sometimes that's the downside to having the approach of legacy heroes.
Yeah.
Because at some point you're going to move off the originals, but they're never going to move off Batman. So how do you rectify all of that stuff? And you can't just, it seems like there for a while, if DC wanted to create a new character, it's like, well, either we're going to give them a power ring or they're going to get speed powers.
Yeah.
And explain the anomaly. Explain the anomaly that is Batman, right? Because you get the Batman family, right? You could write any book about any character in any Batman, any whatsoever, and it would sell. Yeah. But then you got the Flash family. Nobody's going to buy a Jay Garrick book.
Yeah.
Who's going to buy a Max Mercury? I'm sorry, who's Max Mercury? Right.
Yeah.
but I would buy it because I'm a Flash fan and I'm a Flash family fan. But at the same time, it's like Batman gets all the street cred, man. I'm still sad about that.
But and I don't know if you guys how long you guys have read comics, but do you remember the Batman family and the Superman family book?
Yeah. That was
the Superman family one, not the Batman one, though.
That was Chuck Dixon, right?
There was I don't remember who wrote it, but there used to be a Batman family book and a Superman family book and all the characters. Why don't we have a Flash family book?
Yeah.
There's so many things, DC just has to look to their past to mine some of those ideas they did. Those things worked. You could just bring them into the 21st century.
Oh, for sure.
And they would be just as powerful today and just as effective today. Like I said, showcase. Why don't we have a showcase book?
Yeah. And, you don't do that because most of the writers they have now really don't like a lot of the characters they're writing for. And they said it themselves, right? I've watched some interviews, and I won't say any names, but I've watched interviews of some of these creators now on some pretty high-profile books, and they've been asked, how far back did you go to understand the character before you wrote? And they said absolutely nothing. So that's a little disappointing sometimes when you hear that from a writer, and that's why you respect like a Jeremy Adams, because you know that he really cares about the character he's going to write about, and he's going to do some digging to make sure that he is relating things that have happened in the past, so it makes sense for the fans that have been around for so long.
Well, that makes the writer selfish. I mean, if you're going to tell a selfish story, I mean, you're not going to bother to go back and research any kind of characteristic traits about an individual. I mean, you're kind of doing a disservice not only to the book and the character, but to the fan base, because they're going to pick up on that. Myron picks up on that stuff. I mean, he can key it in. Now, I'm not as attuned as Myron's radar is, because that dude's got like a green radar that just sits on his head. but the fans are going to pick up on that. It's like they're not. You can't fool them, man. They're not stupid.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Night Terrors, there's a whole scene with Martin Jordan's funeral, and you see the Jewish imagery because Hal Jordan's mother is Jewish,
right?
And a lot of writers skip over that stuff.
Yeah,
and that's important.
The details, right?
Yeah,
I noticed that right away. I'm like, man, the detail is impressive, man.
I thought it was maybe a little over the top because how Martin Jordan was Catholic.
Yeah.
So it seemed a little, but then you have to remember, well, this is an image being created by Insomnia based on Hal's memories. Yeah. So Hal was a kid. What does he remember? You're building it up from there.
Yeah.
But I think one of the differences between today's writers and the writers of yesterday was the writers of yesterday didn't think anything for themselves beyond writing for the big two.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, it's about breaking into the industry in the big two, making a name for yourself, and then going independent for independent
Hollywood
so that you own the IPs.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just a gateway.
Yeah.
More than it is the destination.
For sure. No, that's definitely it. The other question I had for both of you was Sinestro. So we've seen instances of Sinestro throughout the first three, and then we get that little short story at the end in Night Terrors. I don't know if you had a chance to kind of digest it yet, but any thoughts as to what's going on there too? Because it's a pretty unique story, apart from Hal Jordan, obviously. I was wondering what your thoughts were on that, and if you had any insight as to what you think might be going on there, or you haven't really had chance to like digest it yet.
I've been thinking about it since I read the issue, and the interesting thing is Alex Segura is writing this version of Sinestro. We don't know what's transpired because we haven't seen
Yeah,
Sinestro enough in the main book.
exactly.
We're only 2 issues in, and all we've really seen is 2 panels of Sinestro sitting in a bar.
Yeah.
So you don't know really what's been going on. But when this issue opens up with his section,
Yeah.
he's already almost despondent.
Yeah.
And this is before the wave is even come and hit.
Yeah.
And I think Sinestro's biggest fear is that he will be irrelevant. That he's lost his relevancy. He doesn't have his ring. He doesn't have his core. He's a broken character.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. I think some of it goes back to whatever happened on Korgar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So something happened on Korgar, and maybe he's feeling a little guilty about something that happened. Because we know Green Lantern died there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe Sinestro's, I don't know.
Maybe
regrets,
maybe.
Happened.
Yeah.
Maybe some regrets. I'm interested to see what happens when we get back from Night Terrors, because it looks like those things are going to come to a head.
They have to, right? Because of that first issue.
Yep.
I think it was the first issue where he's at the bar, right? In issue 1,
yep.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, issue 1. These 2 characters have to collide, and that's the wonderful thing about Sinestro and Hal is they are tied together like Batman and the Joker and Superman and Zod. You can do Sinestro with other Green Lanterns, but they don't have the rich relationship. And Jeff Johns really cemented it by really building up the whole trainer aspect and them being friends and that mutual respect and the feelings of betrayal from Sinestro's point of view. Sinestro, back in the day was very much portrayed as the mustache twirling villain.
Yeah.
And this is much more complex. Yeah. He's Space Hitler, really.
Yeah, and much deeper now. Much deeper.
Yeah. He really believes that he's doing the right thing. And that's the mark of a good villain character. Yeah. They're not the villain in their own story. And his method, he's got the right goal in mind. He has the same goal as the Guardians do, but his methods are so wrong.
Yeah.
And I think deep down he feels this regret that Hal didn't come along with him on the journey.
Yeah.
Because I think he thinks this could have been my brother. This could have been the person who replaced Abin Sur in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And we could have. I don't want to say we could have ruled the galaxy together because that's too Star Warsy. Yeah. But they could have really made an impact if everybody just followed along with what Sinestro wanted.
Yeah.
And you see, in Sinestro Corps, it wasn't even though it looked like Sinestro was trying to overthrow people on Earth. Really, what he was trying to do was just get the Guardians to break some rules.
Yeah.
It was all a big chess match, which is what's brilliant about how Jeff Johns wrote Sinestro.
Yeah. Incredible. Do you think there is a best writer of Green Lantern up to this point? Would it have to be Jeff Johns just because of everything that we spoke about earlier and the run that he had? Or is there...
I don't know if you can call it... The term best is used so loosely, it's
it's super
by definition it's so vague because it's a lot depends on it's objective, right? It's like
it's very Myron, right, depending on the favorite character and all that good stuff,
and depending about your own personal
how about the most impactful for Green Lantern? How about that?
It definitely has to be Johns. He took the entire franchise that was falling apart and he revived it in such a big way.
It's huge.
Green Lantern was a popular character back in the day.
Yeah.
And it's very, we've talked about it on the show a little bit. It's been very cyclical.
Yeah.
But Johns just took it to a place where it hadn't been before, that it was such not only a huge critical success, but a fan success and a sales success. We hadn't seen that in ever, really.
Yeah.
So it's hard, when you say best, like Phil says, it's hard because what's your barometer to gauge that? Yeah. Because you could argue, well, John Broome, without John Broome, we wouldn't have any of this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, but every writer that's come along most of them have added things to the franchise to make it what it is.
Yeah.
Who hasn't, Myron?
I'm not going there.
I think that's been established very well, Phil.
It's funny though, because as much as I did not like the Thorne run, he had some interesting ideas. He talked about some of the things that he didn't get to do with the book.
Yeah.
He had a very distinct plan where he realized, one, that John Stewart is never going to be the Green Lantern.
Yeah.
He's not.
Yeah.
Because Hal he's the poster child for the franchise.
Yeah.
So that was why he was trying to take John in a different direction to make him something different. He was going to do something different with Simon. He was basically going to take all the Earth Lanterns and give them something else to do.
Yeah.
So that they can have a place to be on their own. And I totally get it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's not a bad idea though.
No.
Yeah.
I think John was interesting as a Dark Star there for a while. And I think sometimes I this is going to sound odd, but I agree with Thorne that for the John Stewart character to thrive, he has to get out from underneath the Green Lantern shadow.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening either. So I think it's an unfortunate thing for the character. To me, it just goes back to do we need all these Earth Lanterns? I don't know.
I mean, I think there's a lot more than people realize too. Yeah, I think, you have your Hal, you have your Kyle, you have, like, people know those ones. You have John, obviously Alan, Guy Gardner, but there's a lot more than that too. And I don't think people realize how many lanterns have come from Earth. And it has gotten maybe a little out of hand, although a lot of them are one issue type situations, or they had the ring for a short period of time and then it was gone. But it's interesting that, to your point that you made earlier, when you have so many, especially ones that have been developed to a certain point, like a Kyle Rayner, you really start to divide fans. And so when we do have, like right now, an amazing opportunity for Green Lantern fans to have a lot of really good things happen, I'm not going to read that because I don't like Hal or something like that. Like, guys, this is about as good as it's ever going to get for Green Lantern. It's been a while.
You get that there's a contingency of fans that won't buy the Jeremy Adams book, because they're a John fan, but they're not going to buy it even though there's a backup, because they don't want to inflate the sales.
Guys, this is
petty, man.
Buy it if you like. Buy it if you like the character. It's important.
Exactly.
The John Stewart backup has been really good. I've enjoyed it, and I
have too.
Like Phil, I'm not really a huge John Stewart fan.
But I love John Stewart because of the Justice League cartoon. That had a big impact on me. So I do really enjoy that character. I mean, Hal, I think, is my favorite too, but I do feel like there's more that could be said about John. I think he's been a little kind of plain for a very long time, and I think that could be developed a little bit more. It'd be really interesting to see what happens with this War Journal coming out later in this year, because there's a story to be told somehow.
It's interesting because you have people like myself who read John prior to the Justice League cartoon. He's a very different character than the John we got in the cartoon. And so Jeff Johns tried to blend them together. And so we've kind of got this amalgamation, but John has never had a good run to build up a supporting cast. For so long, he was an architect working at Ferris Air. He was a supporting cast person, not the leading cast. And you almost need to be very aggressive about, well, let's pluck him and put him in someplace else and build a world around him. So that he can have those things, so that you can develop some layers, because he's either been the grunting Marine, no nonsense. I've often joked that they've made him Batman without any of the parts that make him interesting. You know what I mean? They've done that, but then there's so much else to that character. If you go back and read the Mosaic run, I know that Gerard Jones is not, he's a persona non grata. He's done some horrible things, but
for sure,
go back and read that run. That was really good for John Stewart.
Oh, it's the best insight into John Stewart by far. And it was a decent run. I mean, I have the run. I was just looking at it earlier today, and I mean, it's terrible that you had all these people that worked so hard on that run. You have this one terrible human being that really ruined that entire run. DC's removed it from canon, and you know what I mean? You can't, I have the app, the DC app, it's not on the app. So they've actually wiped it all out.
It'll never be collected.
All that hard work that all those people did on that run, which was good, is now gone, which I think is really sad because it was well developed. I understand the reasons why. I'm certainly not against what they did. That's about as horrific of a thing that could take place. But I mean, I think also has hurt John Stewart as well.
I agree.
Right. I mean, if you're 50 years old and you had your 20s removed from your history, right? I mean,
Right.
that's kind of
Right.
what happened, right? All
So
of a sudden, you're going from
all they were left
19
with
to 30.
yeah, all you were left with was Xanshi from
Yeah.
Cosmic Odyssey.
Yeah.
And then you had people saying, well, why do we have to keep bringing Xanshi up again? And because that was really the only defining thing you had. It's the only thing you had, the only meat on the bones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I agreed with Thornton that you almost need to take John and give him a fresh start somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Maybe you start the Dark Stars back up and he leads the Dark Stars or something.
Yeah.
To give him that opportunity to grow. If the character's a strong character, they'll survive an identity change in terms of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it's ever going to happen because the fan base, I don't think, will allow it.
Yeah.
No, you're right. They won't.
No. It's just like you've got the Hal fans, you've got the John fans, you've got the Kyle fans.
Yeah.
And they're the three biggest factions that kind of are always going, and it's gotten a lot less than it used to be. There for a while, it was pretty.
Well, when you have nothing for a couple of years, that'll help with that situation.
Right. But then what happens is when something is announced, like, well, why does this character get it? What about my character? And it's unfortunate. And the same thing happens when we just talk about the movies.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing that happened today with Fillion, right? I mean, there's people railing against it. Oh, well, why is it? And that's what ticks me off the most about fans, because it's like, well, you don't know what the plan is, man.
Yeah. Wait, at least give this guy a chance.
Right.
Yeah, but
I'll be honest, that Superman Legacy, all the casting has been excellent. I think.
Fine.
I mean, every single person that they've done, from Superman to Hawk Girl to, I mean, all of them have been really good so far. And I know Fillion's a little bit older, but I think he could pull off a Guy Gardner. I really do. To your point, what happens in 2 years when you need Guy Gardner again? You know what I mean? You start to, I mean, there's only, I guess CGI needs to get better, right? If they're going to continue to use Fillion, but I think he could pull it off.
Yeah.
If they do it for Al too, right?
Did you see the announcement? Go ahead,
Myron. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, did you hear they announced Metamorpho today?
No. Yeah, they announced Metamorpho.
Oh, that's right. I did see that. And I thought that was good too.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of theory that's going to, I mean, it sounds like the Terrifics,
Yeah.
Which I'll be honest with you, was cool. I like the Terrifics.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool.
I almost think that the Gun is going to use this as a way to really expose fans to the DC universe.
Yeah.
That Superman's not going to be the only character right out of the gate. We're going to jump into the universe is already here. We're not going to spend all the time building these up.
If you go back to 2008, man, Iron Man was a B-lister.
Yeah.
He wasn't prime. He wasn't primed up.
And now no one's bigger than Iron Man.
Right?
Yeah.
If you can put a spotlight on some of those low key characters,
and
it doesn't, and you don't even have to like make major movies out of them, but at least utilize them in a way to where they have the appearances or whatnot, or the crossovers. The people love it, and people love nostalgia too. If they go back and do like a JSA kind of style and keep it old school, people are going to eat it up, man.
Yeah.
I mean, if you went back and talked to our younger selves, we never thought we would have lived to see today where there were 2 or 3 Ant-Man movies.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Ant-Man.
So,
and actually, I think a lot of people feel like they've made one too many of those too.
I think the fan base needs to take a really good hard look at itself and take a step back and just give room to breathe with this. I mean, you got a guy that's taken on a lot, and I got news for you. Nobody wishes that job on anybody.
Yeah.
Who the hell would want to work for WB? I would not want to work for that company, man.
Yeah.
And this guy's taking on a big task, and give him a chance before you bury the guy.
I know they're wanting to fire this guy, and not one project that he's been in charge of has happened yet. 2025 is his first project. I think people need to realize that, right?
Well, it's the Marvel DC fanboy thing is such a people review bomb movies that aren't even out yet.
Yeah. And I'm sick of the comparisons. Well, it didn't do as good as this one. Who cares?
Yeah.
I don't care if it did. I don't care if I liked Megaforce, and I think it's better than that movie that you just watched. It made $5 billion.
These people have not had to live through Nicholas Hammond as Spider-Man. Okay. They didn't have the
TV series. The TV series, right?
They didn't have the wasteland where there was no superhero content for years. You were just excited to see somebody in a costume on TV.
Exactly.
I gotta say though, I haven't got to watch The Flash yet, the movie,
Yeah.
but I did see the clip that showed Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Still beside myself on why they would think about that stupid and put him in there. Why? He looks terrible. He looks terrible.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, it is like the movie's like 2.5 hours long. It is literally 20 seconds.
I
Um,
know. I
but
know.
they had all the buildup of how he went, he read for Superman, right? They were talking about doing one, and then nothing ever happened. And so I felt they thought that would be kind of funny to show that he actually became Superman in another universe, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I did love I did enjoy the movie. I wouldn't say I loved it. I did enjoy it. The CGI was a little quirky at times, but I do not think it was as bad as a lot of people said it was. But also, I'll be honest with you. I don't think Green Lantern as bad. The movie Green Lantern is as bad as people have said it is. Is it a great movie? No, it's not a great movie, but it's a good movie. It wasn't bad. And at the time, the CGI, I thought it was pretty decent for that time. I think Ryan Reynolds being kind of a comedian part-time has made it worse than it really was, because he kind of jokes around. I will tell you the worst movie I've ever seen is Daredevil. That was the worst movie, I think, from
and they're bringing back Elektra, and they're bringing
back
and which means I think what's his name will play. I have a feeling that they'll throw him in somehow as Daredevil again.
I would not be surprised if Affleck showed up.
Yeah, Affleck, I think, will wear the suit, even if it's a split second. Yeah, just like Superman.
I agree with you. I don't think the 2011 movie was as bad as people like to make it out as. I thought it was better than the first Thor movie, which came out to the same time as that.
Yeah.
But I think they tried to. Unfortunately, you would think that Warner Brothers owning DC, we would have gotten all of these things. They would have had their act together.
Yeah.
But they really didn't. They tried to run it like a traditional movie studio. If they just created DC Studios, gave them a pot of money and let them go and make superhero movies, as long as they kept making a profit, they could keep going, they'd have been fine. But they tried to deal with it the same way they've made movies for 100 years. And they tried to impose their studio mentality on it. And we want it shorter. We want you to do this. We want to control the casting. And if they had just let them do it, it'd have been much better. I think if anything, it was disappointing because you know how good it could be, and it wasn't that. Like doing Parallax was too much to do in the first movie. If they had just done Manhunters in the first movie,
or Hector Hammond, or fleshed out a Hector Hammond story arc, would have been decent. And then you could have let it into something else. But I just think
from a toy perspective, Manhunters would be great because it'd be easy to make the toys. From a CGI perspective, you only need one model. So it would have been cost effective from there.
I don't think a Hector Hammond toy would look very right.
I have a Hector Hammond toy right back on that shelf.
Do you?
It does not look right.
Told you it doesn't look right.
But I think Hector Hammond is too esoteric of a character, or too cerebral of a character for audiences to grasp on for an action movie. Whereas a character fighting robots, totally can get behind that, And then you could have revealed that Sinestro was behind the robots, and that leads to the Sinestro Corps. And in the second movie, like in my dream version, you would have had a scene where Hal is in a bar, a military bar, and gets into a fight over a woman with a Black Marine. They get into a fight. They end up in the brig together. Cue up the Authority song playing in the background while it's going on. They both get dragged up by the MPs, and they dislike each other begrudgingly, right? You get to the second movie, and they have to have a second Green Lantern from Earth, or from each sector, to deal with Sinestro Corps. That Marine is John Stewart. He becomes Green Lantern. They have to become partners. And now it's like, this guy. This guy. And you get the Lethal Weapon vibe, not the age difference, but the John Stewart very serious about this role. Got to be really, serious about it. And Hal's the maverick that he is.
I'll figure it out when it happens type of guy, right?
Yes. And that's that part of the Lethal Weapon vibe would work. And then that carries the second movie.
Right.
And you could have gone from there. It could have built from that. But
I am sure James Gunn is going to listen to this podcast, and he's going to be reaching out to you, Myron.
No,
One,
he won't.
one can hope.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, it's about that time, my friends. I just want to say I cannot tell you how fun this was. I had an absolute blast meeting both of you. Like I said, I love your podcast. I try to watch all of them, and they're. I mean, you have so many, so I have to go back into history and watch some of the older ones or listen to them. But man, you guys are amazing. I've learned a lot more about Green. I thought I knew enough, because you read for many years, but you're bringing up stuff I never heard of before sometimes in your shows, and I just
Yeah,
absolutely love it. The
that's what happens
education
with 'em.
around it. Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I find myself going to eBay and purchasing comics that you all are talking about just so that I could read the runs too. And man, it's just been a lot of fun. And so, Phil, thank you for answering me on Twitter. I appreciate that, man. And then getting Myron on board, making you do a podcast probably for a third time this month instead of your usual two.
But you know what though? This is cool though, Tommy, because it's like,
Yeah,
all right, now we got somebody else. I mean, it
yeah,
gets it's like a circle of friends, man.
absolutely,
Just
man. I
start.
love it.
I'm probably gonna shoot you a random text every now and then just
Yeah, I
to
hope so.
bullshit with you or whatever. But
I love it.
this is great, man. And I was flattered that you did reach out.
Yeah,
But I don't think I read the text at first. I think I missed it or something like that. And then I went
yeah,
back and reread it, and I was like, oh, he wants he wants us to come on. And that's when I
yeah.
sent it to Myron. I was
Well,
like,
it's been a while since, other than being on the Lantern Cast, we usually do a State
yeah,
of the Green Lantern Union episode.
Uh-huh.
I haven't been on another podcast other than our own in quite a long time. I think
Yeah.
because I've been a little outspoken about some things.
Yeah.
So people don't want me on.
it happens.
But it's a lot of fun time. I mean, we really appreciate you asking us to come on, because
Yeah.
when you're making content, you're always you have the responsibility of making the show and all that stuff. It's nice to be a guest.
Yeah. Tommy will do the editing. We don't have to worry
Right,
about
I don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
If you get
No,
a
it's
chance,
fun.
if you get a chance, Tommy, there's a
Yeah.
guy I follow on Twitter, David Coker.
Okay, David
Um,
Coker.
yeah, he's a big, huge Green Lantern fan. He actually sent me and Myron signed copies of the first issue of Green Lantern from Adams.
Oh, wow.
And then he also sent me, I got it about a month ago, the signed copy from Jeff Johns
Oh,
of
wow.
Yeah.
Green Lantern. Yeah.
He
That's
lives out there on
awesome.
the West Coast, and
He lives on the West Coast. Reach
Oh,
out
cool.
to him. He's a big Lantern fan too, and
Yeah.
it's all about the friendships, man. So
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I'm on some Reddit channels too, some Green Lantern Reddit channels, and
yeah.
it's just really cool, man. There's one that has like a couple 100,000 people on it,
Yeah.
which is crazy. I'm like, that is awesome.
Yeah,
Why
it's cool.
isn't this issue like number one in the top 10 for DC if you have 200,000 people in a
Right.
Reddit chat room? I mean, I'm rarely on Reddit, but when I am, I'm like, dude, this should be like number one if
Yeah.
there's this many people. But to your
Right.
point, maybe they're Kyle fans or something like that, and they don't want to read Hal Jordan.
Or they don't want to spend the money and they pirate it, and they don't realize they're hurting
Yeah.
the industry by doing
Exactly. Yeah, good point.
Exactly.
Yeah. That happens. Well, gentlemen, thank you again. Everyone that's listening, you got to go to the podcast of OA. You could also go to www.blogofoa.com to read all of the amazing content on Green Lanterns. I personally enjoy the podcast, so check that on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to their channel. If you want to know anything and everything that has ever happened to Green Lanterns, Green Lantern Corps, everything in between, these are the two gentlemen you should be listening to. Myron, Phil, thank you again for being on. Really appreciate it. I'm hoping we could do this again with all the news that's happening around Green Lantern. I would love to have you on just to talk about it when it does happen.
Absolutely, my friend. We'd be
Yeah,
glad to.
absolutely. That'd be great.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Have a great rest of your week and look forward to talking soon.
Thanks,
too.
Tommy. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.